Hi, and welcome to this video on project scheduling management. The objective of this video is going to be to first explain what is project schedule and then what's included in the project schedule so that you can understand project scheduling management. And then we'll talk about duration compression, project scheduling management tools, and 12 key scheduling best practices. So let's go ahead and begin. So in order to discuss project scheduling management, we first need to define what a project schedule is so we know what we're managing. A project schedule is an outline of a project that organizes tasks and activities, estimates their duration, identifies their dependencies, sets overall milestones, and places all the information on a timeline. It also defines the resources needed to complete these tasks. So the project schedule is the tool that communicates what work needs to be performed, which resources of the organization will perform the work, and the timelines in which the work needs to be performed. The project schedule should reflect all of the work associated with delivering the project on time. Without a full and complete schedule, the project manager will be unable to communicate the complete effort in terms of costs and resources necessary to deliver the project. So all the work necessary to complete the deliverable of the project is accounted for in the schedule. It also includes all associated costs as outlined in the project budget. Clearly, the project schedule is an essential tool to deliver a project on time and within budget. Project schedules are created and tracked with project scheduling software, which has key functions that allow project managers to monitor the progress of tasks, resources, and costs in real time. They also align work, link dependent tasks, view dashboards, and allocate resources and more. And we'll talk about the tools later in this video. So what's included in the project schedule? Well, the project schedules are created during the planning phase and are crucial to the creation of the project plan where deliverables and requirements are identified. The project schedule is designed to guide the project team throughout the execution phase of the project. Then, during the execution phase, the schedule is used as a baseline to which the actual progress is compared against. So the following are included in the creation of the project schedule: deliverables, tasks, dependencies, task duration and project deadline, budgets, and resource duration. And when creating a project schedule, a project manager needs to do the following steps. They need to define who has the authority over the schedule. They need to identify project activities and tasks, figure out what tasks are dependent on other tasks, sequence the activities and tasks chronologically, estimate needed resources, determine duration of activities and tasks, and build project schedule and monitor and control it throughout the project lifecycle. So project scheduling management. To manage schedules successfully, a project manager first needs to plan the schedule management, define the activities, sequence the activities, estimate the activity durations, develop the schedule, and then manage the control of the schedule. So let's talk a little bit about these. So the planning phase involves the creation of the schedule management plan along with the expectations of how the schedule will be met. Defining the activities, that's where you define what is required and they're defined and itemized. Sequencing the activities is when the project manager puts the activities in order and assigns dependencies to each activity. For example, if a task can't get started until the previous one finishes, then they have a finish to start relationship. And there's other relationships like finish to finish, start to start, and possibly even start to finish. This step also includes determining leads and lags, or the amount of time required for extracurricular tasks at the beginning or ending of the activity. Estimating the activity durations. Well, estimating activity durations involves the project manager estimating out the time required to perform each activity as accurately as possible. The three primary estimating techniques are utilized that are analogous, parametric, and three-point estimating. To estimate activities requires the use of various project scheduling tools, and project managers can interview the team and other stakeholders to get their perspective of how long certain tasks can take and can refer to historic data from similar past projects. There are mathematical and analytics also and the tools to do them. There's the critical path method, which is CPM. It's an equation that shows the longest possible timeline for the project. The project evaluation and review technique, which is a PERT, which also visualizes the flow of tasks for better estimates but shows the task dependencies as well. Project managers also use duration compression, which allows for changes without impacting the project scope. Simulation, resource leveling heuristics, and creating a task list using a calendar, using a Gantt chart, and any other tools that can help with estimating, collecting, and tracking of the project tasks is also important. A work breakdown structure, a WBS, shows how many tasks and deliverables there are to get to your final deliverable. And it's a tree diagram that has your project goal at the top with branches underneath it and shows all the steps needed to get there. This tool makes sure that you don't leave out anything while you're creating your schedule. Developing the schedule is completed once the duration of each activity and resource is known. And this phase involves using methods such as the critical path method or the critical chain method to determine the overall completion date of the project. Float times for these activities are also included in here. And then controlling the schedule, that's pretty much the most important process because as you want to stay within the timeline, budget, and scope of the project. So let's talk about duration compression that I previously just discussed. So another part of project scheduling management is knowing ways to adjust a schedule if the needs arise without changing the scope of the project. This is called duration compression. And there's two techniques you can use, fast tracking or crashing. Fast tracking helps you find tasks that could be done simultaneously or be partially overlapping to speed up the project's deliverable. For that, take a look at the critical path to decide which activities could be fast tracked. So say you started a new project and have already gathered all the requirements. And at this point, you could start with the design phase and only start with software development if design is ready. But if you need to fast track both processes, then you could start software development after first the most important designs are ready, and then continue to prepare later views while programmers implement materials they've already received. So although fast tracking may seem appealing, remember about the risks too, as you will have to manage several important activities at once. It's easier to make costly mistakes or sacrifice quality. Crashing now is another compression technique, which is about adding extra resources to finish the project on time. It's a tricky one though, because as you need to have more spare resources that you can use. And just because you're throwing more resources at something doesn't mean it is going to get done faster. So not all tasks also can be done faster by adding more team members. And note that adding more human resources to a late software project still makes it late, which is connected to the general law of diminishing returns. So the reason for this is you're adding communication and it's needed to introduce new team members to the project and it limits divisibility of the tasks. So another way to use crashing technique then is to add time, like you're going to pay somebody overtime, but it still has to fit a deadline. So the cons of this approach is raising the cost for the project. Project scheduling management tools. So there's a variety of tools and apps that are available to project managers to help provide project scheduling management. Many years ago, it basically was just Microsoft Project, but now there's a wide variety. So most common ones that I usually see is Microsoft Project, but I have worked in teams that use things like Smartsheets and Monday and Rike and Asana and Trello. Scheduling tools basically help you to identify and allocate desired resources within the project's time frame. And these tools can also help you to forecast the schedule for a new project, as you've already, have lots of insights from the previous ones. Knowing how your team has performed in the past, what objectives they have had to overcome, and how they have done that is very handy. So modern resource management software offers digital project management and access to a lot of data, and it includes performance or utilization reports as well. So any of these project scheduling management tools are great. It depends on if you and your team are used to using them. So there would be a learning curve if you're not. Also the costs that are associated with them or what a client that you're working for the projects on already have in place. So there's 12 key scheduling best practices that I'd like to go over, and I'll go into each one in depth here. In order to best manage project scheduling, you need to use the best practices to create the project schedule to begin with. But here's 12 key scheduling best practices that you can follow. Number 1, reflect the project execution strategy in the schedule. The project schedule must align with the project execution strategy. These two documents should clearly show how the work will be executed and define the sequence and timing of each step. Project teams will rely on the schedule to plan for upcoming work, understand resource requirements, and to identify risks that may occur during execution. So unless the schedule clearly reflects the project execution strategy, it's of little value to the teams. 2, capture the entire scope of work. The schedule should reflect all of the activities and work needed to accomplish the project's objectives and to meet all the requirements of the contract. When it comes to project execution, controlling the scope of work and its impact on the schedule is crucial. 3, set reasonable activity durations. The schedule should clearly set out how long each activity will take. These activity durations should be reasonably short, meaningful, controllable, and allow for discrete progress measurement. When defining activity durations, the quantity of work and resources needed should also be taken into account. 4. Logically sequence and link all activities. To ensure critical project management milestones are met, activities must be logically sequenced and linked. For example, a predecessor activity must finish before its successor. All too often in projects, data constraints and lags, such as the extension of an activity duration, are used to fix a start or finish date. The issue with this is that using a negative lag extensively to allow activities to be planned in parallel and squeezing the required work into an unrealistic time frame to meet project milestones results in a less reliable schedule. And what's more is if the duration of the predecessor is shortened, the successor may end up starting before its predecessor. So the best practices dictates that when sequencing activities, you should look out for high value lags and aim to have a finish to start as the dominant dependency type. 5. Keep date constraints to a minimum. The use of constraints and lags hinders free-flowing paths and prohibits accurate float calculations and critical path identification. They can also lead to inaccurate project start and finish dates being set. So for these reasons, although there are sometimes necessary, the use of constraints and lags should be kept to a minimum. Number 6, avoid dangling activities. When building your project schedule, you should avoid dangling activities with no or incomplete logic. To produce an accurate critical path schedule, the implications of change to an activity's duration must be reflected in its successor and the project as a whole, without the need for extra manual work. So if there are dangling activities, their float values will not be accurate, meaning that the critical path may not be identified correctly, and as a result, you may end up formulating a completely inaccurate project completion date. Number 7, check the critical path makes sense. The schedule should identify both the project's critical paths and the longest path. Be mindful that critical paths often change during project execution as a result of progress updates. So establishing a valid critical path is essential as it allows you to examine the effects of slippage as the project progresses. Since the critical path determines the project's earliest possible completion, extra focus, energy, and attention should be spent on critical activities. If your critical path runs through your management activities, the schedule should be carefully examined and challenged. Number 8, check the schedule contains reasonable float. The schedule should identify float, meaning the amount of time an activity can slip before the project end date or any part of the delivery is delayed. Try to look out for excessively high float, as it can be an indicator of missing logic, and avoid using too many activity date constraints, as they can cause inaccurate float calculations. 9, assign resources to all activities. Project schedules should reflect the resources needs to complete the project successfully. Remember that every activity in the schedule should be resource loaded except for milestones. Activities represent work that must be done to satisfy the project contract. This can't be done without consuming resources, so therefore, any activities without assigned resources shouldn't be in the schedule. Ultimately, the reason resource loading schedules are so useful is that manpower requirements can be planned in advance, allowing for more manpower conflicts or problems to be mitigated and resolved ahead of time. Number 10, verify the resource plan. With the activity duration set, the right logic in place, and a free-flowing resource-loaded schedule, you can now check whether the resource plan is executable. So you should ask yourself, do you have the right amount of resources required at the right acquired time? And are there any density conflicts from concurrent activities and work at the location? After answering these questions, you will be able to decide and make schedule adjustments, thereby improving your chances of executing the project successfully. 11, run a schedule risk analysis. Project schedules are built using single point estimates of activity durations. But when you take risk uncertainty into account, end dates and criticality and level of confidence are likely to change. Therefore, the starting point for a solid schedule risk analysis should always be a clear and accurate critical path schedule. However, as the activity duration is a single deterministic value and not a range of possible outcomes, the end date is also forecasted as a single value. So in real life, the duration of activity may vary, but the single value should be considered your best estimate. So to understand how uncertainty and risk affects your project and your project schedule, run a schedule risk analysis. This statistical model can determine the impacts of risk and uncertainty on confidence levels for meeting the project's completion date. A schedule of risk analysis also helps you define the contingency or reserves of time needed for a certain level of confidence and to identify the focus of high priority risks. So be sure to include the results of your schedule, risk analysis, and mitigations when constructing an executable baseline. And lastly, number 12, set your baseline. The project baseline is a defined benchmark for evaluating your project performance. You should set the baseline after the schedule has been challenged and verified, but before any work starts on the project and progress starts to be reported. Since the baseline acts as a contract with the project team and determines when work will take place, extra care should be taken in getting it right. So aim to set the baseline in stone and don't change it unless authorized to do so. To do this, you need to ensure that the changes to the scope of work are captured through a change control process, and the impact of any change to the baseline are assessed in terms of resources required, cost, and time. During project execution, measure progress against the baseline to determine if you're behind or ahead of schedule and whether any schedule variance that crops out affects downstream work. During this analysis, take extra care in examining any out-of-sequence updates. I hope you enjoyed this video on project scheduling management. Be sure to smash the like button if you like this video. And if you want to listen to more project management videos, I have a ton on my channel and I'm constantly updating them every week. Go ahead and subscribe to my channel and then you'll be notified when a new one comes up. Thank you.